Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. Things are happening in the world right now. Apparently naturalnews.com with Mike Adams was approached by the people, the secret societies people, whoever, people who run the government behind the scenes maybe, who own newspapers like the Washington Post, so he talks about. And they wanted him to help, I guess, discredit or destroy Alex Jones, Info USA. Apparently he said no, and they threatened him. He said, take your best shot, and they threatened him. And the next thing you know, apparently if you go on Google or Yahoo and you search naturalnews.com, you won't find it. 174,000 pages on the Hodges show that he said were deleted. If you searched, all that stuff was, the searches were all deleted. His website was still there, but if you searched for anything, there weren't any more of those results. So anyways, it's the 23rd of February 2017. I was watching the video made yesterday, the day before, and I searched, and apparently I did find naturalnews.com, and many results. So apparently he called their bluff and went on other alternate news sites and talked about this, and the people behind the scenes, some individuals, I guess panicked and put all his stuff back up. So what is this telling us? Well, it's telling me on the particular video I need to make next now, because I was in a quandary. I was pondering, you know, I've been doing UFOs and all these other issues and conspiracy, Zionism. I've been talking about a lot of stuff. So I was wondering what to do next. So anyways, with this news, I decided there is an enemy out there. So that's where I should probably focus my attention. Who is the enemy? What is the enemy? With that said, I'm going to do part 2 of series 109 out of the Encyclopaedia Judaica, number 14, on the topic. Apparently this Messiah that came along declared himself Messiah in 1666. Shabbetai Zevi. See if I can show you this. The top of the page there, and you can see where I left off. So apparently this guy was from the Khazarian area, north of the Mediterranean, Georgia, Ukraine, Western Russia. So I don't believe this Shabbetai Zevi was actually a Hebrew DNA, which they call Shabbetai, but was of the kingdom of, or the bloodlines of the area, the kingdom of Khazaria, the Khazars, who hundreds of years ago embraced the religion of the Hebrews, the Jews, because apparently they wanted to be part of the chosen ones. They didn't want to be assimilated into the Christian religion, Rome, the Catholic religion. Catholic means universal, by the way. And they didn't want to be assimilated into the Arabs' Islamic Mohammedanism religion. So they wanted to remain independent, which obviously for thousands of years, many of the Jews did not want to assimilate. So I thought it'd be interesting to continue reading this part 2 where I left off. But before I do, I'd like to look at a couple books to put this conversation into context. Alright, so before I start getting into the Encyclopaedia Judaica on Shabbetai Zevi, who declared himself Messiah in 1666, which was basically built on the foundation of the Kabbalah. Same thing with the Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike, Helena Blavatsky, Secret Doctrine, Rosie Crucions, and so much more information, apparently a derivative, derived from, offshoot of, however you want to understand it, the Kabbalah, which apparently, according to the Encyclopaedia Judaica, was the foundation of the culture for hundreds of years of the Jewish people. And apparently they communicate with demons and angels, and apparently this Shabbetai Zevi man who claimed he was the new Messiah, if you watched part 1 of 109, he came up with a parallel set of commandments that are just the opposite. Thou shalt kill, thou shalt steal, thou shalt do adultery and all kinds of other perverted things. Covet what people have, bear false witness, worship more than one god, worship idols, and basically be involved in magic, also called sorcery. So I had these other books that have been coming in the mail lately, and I'm reading them, and I will be making videos on them, and they seem to be related to what we're talking about. This evil force bent on destroying Christianity and discredited Jesus according to the Judaica Encyclopedia. The series I made on, I looked up J for Jesus in the Encyclopaedia Judaica, and that was one heck of a insulting material in the encyclopedia under Jesus. I made a video on that. But anyways, so these new books I got, continuing to watch other videos and search out other books to support my premise that we are under attack all over the world. And they are the same thing with them taking down Mike Adams, naturalnews.com, and wanting him to go after Alex Jones and discredit him and ruin him, and he refused. And I think it's going to get worse on this avenue. Like 1984, the book. So anyways, the Hebrew prophets were right. The Hebrew prophets were right by Stephen Wright. Weather modification and UFOs. And I believe the UFOs and the aliens are, generally speaking, evil entities. Angelic beings can manifest into anything, whatever. Obviously, there were greater technologies of the past, like Atlantis and Hyperborea and Mu, and just different monuments all over the world. Another book I got, I've been reading it, and it's already proving to be fascinating, and I'm only on like 4 pages. The book behind the Bible, the Book of Enoch. Another prophet or another father back in time who wrote about the truth about reality, so it said. Here's one I got in the mail today that I know I've been reading a lot about: ritual murders, Pizzagate, Bohemian Grove, throwing a baby in the fire, where Alex Jones snuck on there and took a video, cremation of care, throwing a baby under a burning owl, the Sandy Hook school shooting, where that one newscaster held up a picture of an owl. On the U.S. dollar bill, on the front side, on the right-hand side, on that little perch, you can see an owl. And so many other symbols with the all-seeing eye pyramid, etc., etc. But this book I need to read because I'm apparently in the Kabbalistic Jewish religion, and not all Jewish people. A lot of Jewish people don't know about this. This book was written by a Jewish guy. And so are many other books I've been ordering and reading are written by Jewish authors, trying to expose this sorcery, Kabbalistic worshipping Jewish people, along with many other people they recruit of other religions, And a lot of the ways they recruit them is they get them to join Rosicrucians or Freemasons, and they have to select from the new recruits people who have a propensity to go along with evil, greed and selfishness, service to self. And so they hand select these people to move them up. And of course, that's how you get to be the President of the United States and other elitists on the world. You have to be filtered through these secret society organizations, FYI. But this one here I've got to read and go over and look up what they say here, even in the Encyclopaedia Judaica. I want to find out the truth, what we're all dealing with. And then, of course, I'm reminded of this book by Tex Mars I made a video on. And just to give a brief summary, you can see the Star of David there on the flag of Israel today. Tex Mars, the author of this book, was doing a lecture, and at the end of the lecture, one Jewish man, according to what I've read here in this book and other stuff, said, "Tex Mars, I'm offended by what you said." And Tex Mars says, "Why? Aren't we all of the seed of Adam and Eve?" And according to Tex Mars, the individual said, "No, I am of the seed of the serpent." So this is what this man said. So I need to continue reading this book and make another video eventually. Another book I got in the mail, I continue to research the psychic research. Everything from remote viewing to ghost sightings or whatever. Occult Visions, a mystical gaze into the future. We all know about the Illuminati card game, or if you don't know, look it up. And it has all those symbols, pictures in this card game, with the Twin Towers being blown up, with the big dams exploding, all kinds of things that actually happened. So what is with this seeing the future? Why are they playing games, making games that people can buy with all the cards telling us? Or on the Simpsons animated cartoon show, and the clocks behind him, and on a newspaper he's holding, and numerous other places, they have little 911s, and many other symbols. With the Twin Towers in the background, by the way, in the Simpsons. You can find this up on the YouTube videos. People have exposed all this. But it's not catching on. People aren't catching on. That's why I do the videos. Another one here, we have something called the Hollow Planet. And it says here, do we truly know what is taking place on this planet? Have we explored and discovered everything there is to find on Earth? And I'm here to tell you the answer is no, we do not all know what's going on. Just go look up Shambhala in the mountains, Himalayas, between China and India. And apparently there have been ancient cultures, even called watchers, beings, that have been there for thousands of years. And apparently there are things like that down there in the Amazon River basin, going upriver. There are accesses to underground facilities and ancient cultures. And apparently even with Antarctica, with Jim Carrey and the Pope and so many other people making trips down there, even during Donald Trump's nomination or whatever, his inauguration speech. Something weird is going on planet Earth. I intend to continue to investigate this. Another book I just got in the mail, David Dionysy, a Jewish author, does a lot of talk shows. Please go on the internet, look his name up, and look up this book and some of his speeches. But apparently there's a lot more going on the scenes with the Kabbalah Jewish thing and the nuclear bombs. So much more. The real reasons why they set off a couple nukes in Japan. Japan was willing and ready to surrender, but apparently some advisors to the president back then said, no way, we need some blood. So here you go, Jewish ritual murder. They needed a blood ritual like 911. So what is all this? Should we be aware of it? The New Age primer, spiritual tools for awakening. What kind of propaganda is everybody being told? Meditation techniques to release tension and connect with guidance from the higher dimensional information. So I need to continue looking into this stuff. And then, of course, another one here that you should look up, a Jewish guy, Christopher John Bjerknes, Racial Zionism. So it's so weird that it's the racists, the people who don't want to integrate with the rest of us, but they want all of us to integrate with each other. The people who claim in their Jewish dogma, some of their nasty books like the Talmud, that the end game is to destroy all Gentiles, all non-Jews. So they want to call us racist when we're not. It's the racists actually calling the non-racist racist. First of all, you can't be anti-Semite because the bulk of the Jews worldwide are not even Hebrew, Shabbetai. They're Khazarian, Ashkenazi, because the kingdom of Khazars, Khazaria, adopted the religion of the Jews hundreds of years ago. And these appear to be the people who are into the Kabbalah, behind the Illuminati, Masonic organizations, and many other thousands of secret societies worldwide. So I've got some really crazy stuff to read and share. So I thought this would be an interesting little introduction into what I'm about to read, so it'll make more sense when you put all that into context of just these few books. And these are just, most of these I just recently got in the mail. So let me begin reading. I'm completely aware a lot of people don't want to believe what I'm about to say, what I'm about to read. But that's okay. We all have the right to think what we want. I can see myself here on this TV screen. So where I left off on Shabbetai Zevi, I'll just start reading and hopefully it'll gel together, make sense. So Shabbetai Zevi, where I left off. In these years he began to speak of a particular mystery of the Godhead, which had been revealed to him through his spiritual struggles. He used to speak of the God of his faith, with whom he felt a particular intimate and close relation. It is not clear whether by this he meant only the Sephirah Teferet, see Kabbalah. So I'm going to get more into the Sephirah, but apparently it's some kind of description of some Godhead, which he saw as an essential manifestation of God, see what I said? Or some supernal power which clothed itself in the Sephirah. And the Sephirah would be that thing with the circles that makes up a tree, 10 circles, the Sephirah. Tree of life, stuff like that. At any rate, the term Elohi, Yasserel, the God of Israel, took on a special mystical meaning in his parlance. His compulsion to violate the law in his illuminated states, which were sometimes accompanied by imagining experiences of levitation. So he had imaginating experiences of levitation. Did he leave his body? And his reputed claims to be the Messiah finally led the rabbis, including his teacher Joseph Escapa, to intervene around 1651. In 1654, they banished him from Smyrna. And I notice when I read the names of these cities like Palmyra, Smyrna, Memphis, these are all cities and places over there in the Middle East. So on the map in the United States, there's something weird about the names of a lot of our cities and towns. FYI. For several years, Shabbetai Zevi wandered through Greece and Thrace, staying as a long time in Salonika, where he made many friends. But this stay also ended in disaster when, during one of his exalted states, he celebrated a ceremonial nuptial service under the canopy with the Torah and committed other acts which were considered intolerable. So he was doing things that were not contrary to their religion in the Torah, a Jewish book, like a Jewish Bible. The Old Testament type material. There he befriended the famous Kabbalist. Many Kabbalists have been accused of sorcery. I just say that so that you get an idea what a Kabbalist is. David Habelo, 1661, an emissary of the Jerusalem community. During this period, he made a first attempt to rid himself of his demonic obsessions by means of particular Kabbalah. On the other hand, during one of his ecstatic periods, he not only celebrated the 3 festivals of Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, all in 1 week. So I guess he wasn't waiting for Christmas, or Easter for Easter. He was celebrating all these things in 1 week. Behavior which was bound to arouse hostility, but went so far as to declare the abolition of the commandments and to pronounce a blasphemous benediction to him who allows the forbidden. So he was banishing Moses' commandments and pronounced a blasphemous benediction, so a praise, to those who allowed the forbidden. So promoting the anti-commandments, you got praise, benediction. In 1662, he decided to settle in Jerusalem, traveling there via Rhodes and Cairo, where he made many contacts. Throughout this period, there is no trace of any Messianic agitation around him, and his genial and dignified behavior during his normal state of mind and his rabbinic and Kabbalistic scholarship made him a respected figure. By the end of 1962, he reached Jerusalem, staying there for about a year, wandering around the holy places and tombs of the saints of old. Moving on. There seems to have been a great deal of talk about his strange character and attacks of offensive behavior, but this was counterbalanced by his ascetic tenure of life. In a sudden emergency, in the fall of 1963, he was sent to Egypt as an emissary for Jerusalem and performed his mission with some success. He stayed in Cairo until the spring of 1965, becoming closely connected with a circle around Rachel Joseph Selhabai, the head of the Egyptian Jewry. So way back down in 1665, the head of Egyptian Jewry was there, who had a deep sympathy with aesthetic and Kabbalistic tendencies. So even the rabbis or the leaders of the Jewish communities back then had a Kabbalistic tendencies, and some Kabbalistic practitioners were accused of sorcery. Just so we understand what that means, that's called witchcraft. Why did they do ritual murders? Apparently, when King Solomon, of King Solomon's temple, had this 6-pointed magic ring, he could call forth angels and demons and make them do his bidding. That's where apparently he got his power. There's more here going on than we all know, and it might behoove all of us to wake up. Whether you want to believe in Jesus or believe in religion or be a Christian or be a Muslim or whatever, you might want to wake up and see where this new age and new world order stuff is going. Not too good. From time to time, Shabbetai Zevi's Masonic fancies returned, and it is probable that in one of these fits of illumination, think about the Illuminati, initiates who get initiated into the Rosicrucians and all the other secret societies, even the Freemasonic lodges, he decided to marry Sarah in one of his illuminated states, an Akhenazi girl. It says Akhenazi here. It doesn't say Shepherdetic. So they weren't real Hebrews. Of doubtful reputation, who either had arrived by herself from Italy or was brought over on his initiative when he heard rumors about her from Italian visitors. So apparently she was a female with ill repute, maybe into prostitution or whatever, and he sent for her to marry. She was an orphan of the 1648 massacres in Podolia and used to tell curious stories about herself and her upbringing by a Polish nobleman. Rumors that she was a woman of easy virtue preceded her and were current even later in the intimate circle of Shabbetai Zevi's admirers, possibly influenced by the example of the prophet Hoshea, who married a whore. Shabbetai Zevi married Sarah in Cairo in March 31, 1664. So remember, he's the one who came up with the parallel set of commandments that are opposite of the commandments. They don't believe you need to do good to get to heaven. They believe you can repent or whatever to get to the higher density. Apparently, Earth today is in the third density, and eventually we will move into the fourth density. Apparently, this New Age material, I was reading about this morning, that even the Earth is going to evolve into something else. So I don't know where they're going with all this, but some of it does seem a bit odd. Alright, so he married this girl in the winter of 1664-65. However, being troubled about his violations of the law, he tried to exorcise his demons. So this guy tried to do an exorcism on himself. Thus, according to his own testimony in a reliable source, he asked God to take away from him all his abnormal states and entered an extended period of stability. Moving on. I hope you're finding this as interesting as I am. But I thought I'd like to get down to the fundamentals. Just down to the very nitty-gritty. What is going on? What are we dealing with? Who is this guy who later calls himself the new Messiah that stirred up the whole Jewish world back then? And seems to be what's behind this New Age religion material. The incident in Shabbetai Zevi's life came with the news that a man of God had appeared in Gaza who disclosed to everyone the secret root of his soul and could give each person a particular formula for the tunkum that his soul needed. When the story of Nathan of Gaza's powers spread, Shabbetai Zevi abandoned his mission and went to Gaza in order to find the tunkum and peace for his soul. In the words of the first report that had been preserved about the beginnings of the movement, around mid-April 1665, he arrived in Gaza to visit the physician of the soul. By then, the latter had in February 1965, an ecstatic vision of Shabbetai Zevi as the Messiah. So he was going to see this doctor of souls who could tell you about yourself. And this person who was this doctor of souls had a vision about this coming Messiah. Springing, no doubt, from the tales about him he had heard in Jerusalem, where Nathan had studied in 1663 under Jacob Haggis. So, you know, like 911 or World War I or World War II, 911, and so much more. Time is relative. The stuff that's going on, the purpose for World War I, World War II, even the Civil War #1 in the United States, French Revolution, German Revolution, English Revolution, Russian Revolution. It's these people were purging, getting rid of certain people, and winding up making tons of money. There were purposes behind all these revolutions and wars to try to bring about this new age, new world order. And a lot of us say, I've heard people say, and I understand, that Rick, they've been saying this and saying this and saying this, and a lot of people just want to shut it out and say, well, I can't take it anymore. But what they don't realize, in the meantime, countries are falling, people are dying. I mean, just look at when I started this video with them taking down Mike Adams' search engine results for naturalnews.com. Has 174,000 pages, a lot of it on health issues. Wanting to destroy Alex Jones and Infowars.com, and much more crazy stuff that's going on. Jade Helm in 2015. And there are preparations for this new age, new world order. There is propaganda in the news. They do talk about a second civil war in the United States that they say is unavoidable. And then, of course, now they're talking about some flu virus spreading all over Asia, possibly killing lots of people. So they have a lot of tools in their toolbox to pull out and use against us. And if we're not paying attention, we'll buy into this stuff like 911. Instead of curing Shabbetai Zevi of his malady, his soul doctor, Nathan, tried to convince him that he was indeed the true Messiah. At first refusing to pay any heed to his opportunities, Shabbetai Zevi nevertheless accompanied Nathan on a pilgrimage to some of the holy places in Jerusalem and Hebron. So back in 1665 and 1666, they're visiting all the holy places, and Nathan is now declaring Shabbetai Zevi the true Messiah, but who has a tendency to have a set of commandments opposite of the 10 Commandments. Seeking the path to the Godhead by doing evil instead of doing good, as is taught to we Christians and other people of other religions. I did take a comparative religion course in college, and this Iranian teacher pointed out that most of the religions of the world have similar commandments. That would be like the 10 Commandments, not these evil commandments. Just saying. To discuss their visions and validity, Nathan, an outstanding young rabbi, was the first man to confirm independently Shabbetai Zevi's own Masonic dreams, and moreover to explain the particular rank and nature of the Messiah's soul in the Kabbalistic scheme of creation. According to one story, they were celebrating the night of Shavuot in Nathan's house along with a group of rabbis when Nathan fell into a trance and announced Shabbetai Zevi's high rank before the assembly. Fell into a trance. Remember, when the remote viewers the government hires and trained, Tim Rifat, David Morehouse, and many others I've gone over, they get induced into a trance to leave their bodies to go spy for the government. And shamanist people who take drugs all over the world, from Peru, American Indians, Hopis, all over Russia, wherever there are shamans and tribes, they go into a trance to travel and see this separate reality. As I made a video on Carlos Castellanda, A Separate Reality. So this other world, in my opinion, does exist. And again, I say we're all spiritual beings in these biological bodies. The thing is it a good spirit or an evil spirit? Is it a spiritual person who wants to service to others, who is kind and giving? Or is it a selfish soul who wants to be an aristocrat, leader of the world, a king or something like that, and wealthy, and a perverted individual, raping, abusing people? What are we dealing with these two opposite types of religion, one evil and one good? A lot of people don't want to buy that. That's okay. I can read from this book, we can discuss it, then people can decide. Alright, so this Nathan announced Shabbetai Zevi's high rank before the assembly, according to another version that happened in the absence of Shabbetai Zevi, who had one of his attacks of melancholy and stayed away. About this time, Nathan produced an apocalyptical text about the apocalypse, attributed to one Abraham He Hasid, a contemporary of the famous Judah He Hasid, who, as it were, prophesied the appearance of Shabbetai Zevi and foretold his early life in apocalyptic terms, proclaiming him the Redeemer of Israel. So what kind of evil forces in Israel today, the Zionist forces, that seem to want to take over the world, that are bringing about this new age and new world order? And they have much more evil plans for the rest of us, so it seems. I showed you some books at the beginning of this video. I have many more. I've made many hours of videos. At what point do people not see there's something crazy going on? And we need to wake up. I need everybody to wake up, because certainly I and other people who are awake can't do it by ourselves. But we do have the power of the mind. We also can manifest. We also can talk to God. But that's not what they want. Things they don't want you to know. When some days after Shavuot, Shabbetai Zevi entered another period of illumination, he had absorbed all these new events, and now sure of himself and of Nathan's prophetic gifts, returned to his former Masonic claims with renewed strength. So he declared himself Messiah for a while. Then he slowed down, he had doubts, and now with Nathan supporting him, he's back with a lot of strength, believing he's the Messiah. On the 17th of Sivan, May 31, 1666, in Gaza, he proclaimed himself as the Messiah and swept with him the whole community, including its rabbi Jacob Najata, grandson of the celebrated poet Israel Najara. Some weeks later, a frenzied excitement followed. Riding around on horseback in majestic state, Shabbetai Zevi summoned a group of his followers, appointing them as apostles or representatives of the 12 tribes of Israel. Moving on. In the front of the house this time. Exploring different places to make the video. Anyways, the Masonic news spread like wildfire to other communities in Palestine, but encountered strong opposition from the outstanding rabbis of Jerusalem. So like we see with 9/11 and the invasion of the Middle East, stuff was going on that was kind of crazy way back then. In kingly fashion, Shabbetai Zevi circled Jerusalem 7 times on horseback. Wow, this was a big to-do, proclaiming him Messiah. Winning over some of the rabbis like Samuel, Mattathias, Bloch, Israel, Benjamin, Moses, Galante. The fact that the latter's adherence to Shabbetai Zevi was later suppressed. His conflict with the majority of the rabbis came to a head, and they banished him from the town, but after informing the rabbis of Constantinople of what happened, they apparently took no other active steps against the Messianic propaganda. Nathan, on the other hand, who now appeared as the prophet, standard bearer of Shabbetai Zevi, so this would be the soul healer rabbi, and the group around him were very active. He proclaimed the need for a mass movement of repentance to facilitate the transition to the coming redemption, a step which was sure to win many hearts and could scarcely be opposed by the rabbinic authorities. People from the surrounding countries flocked to him to receive individual penance, or wrote asking him to reveal to them the root of their soul and tell them how to restore it. Excessive facts and other ascetic exercises became the order of the day, But Nathan proclaimed the abolition of the fast of the 17th of Tammuz, which instead was celebrated as the Day of Joy in Gaza and Hebron. Letters went out, first to Egypt, and the circle of Raphael Joseph, telling of the wonderful deeds of the prophet and Messiah. One of the striking new features of these letters was the announcement that neither the prophet nor the Messiah were obliged to give proof of his mission by performing miracles. Remember, Jesus performed a lot of miracles. But that Israel should believe in Shabbetai Zevi's mission without any external proof. The actual history of the subsequent mass movement is characterized by the intrinsic contradiction between the demand for pure faith as a redeeming value and the overwhelming wave of legends and reports of miracles which swept the diaspora. Remember, the diaspora is where all the Jews were dispersed all over the world. The first reports that reached Europe were, curiously enough, not about Shabbetai Zevi, but about the appearance of the lost 10 tribes of Israel, who were said to be marching under the command of the prophetic and saintly man of God, about whom all sorts of miraculous stories were told. According to some versions, they were conquering Mecca. According to others, assembling in the Sahara Desert. And in a third version, marching into Persia, Iran. Rumors of this kind coming from Morocco reached Holland, England, and Germany in the summer of 1665, without giving any indication of what was actually had happened in Gaza or naming Shabbetai Zevi, or making any other mention of the appearance of the Messiah. Moving on. By contrast, there was a great deal of commotion in the Oriental Jewish communities, which had more direct communication with Palestine. In September 1665, fortified by the new revelation, Nathan addressed a long letter to Raphael Joseph, announcing in the first part the changes which had taken place in the hidden worlds, which had the arrival of redemption, and explaining what these changes entailed for the practice of Kabbalistic devotions. Kabbalistic devotions. I said the Kabbalah was the culture of the Jews back then. Might behoove us to find out what it is about the Kabbalah. Why were some of them accused of sorcery? The Kavanaught meditations. A lot of people are into meditating these days. The New Age. Any connection? Of Isa Luria were no longer valid because of the inner structure of the universe had changed and no holy sparks were left under the domination of the powers of evil. Holy sparks were left under the domination of the powers of evil, the Kilopot. The time of redemption had come, and even though some might oppose it, they could not prevent it. That's what they say about this New Age now, and this New World Order, where they think all the non-Jews are goyim, cattle with no souls, and they plan to eliminate every one of them, us. Just saying, you read books, that's what it says. And would do no harm to themselves. Shabbetai Zevi had the power to justify the greatest sinner, even Jesus, and whoever entertains any doubts about him, though he may be the most righteous man in the world, he, Shabbetai Zevi, may punish him with great afflictions. So they call on Jesus a great sinner. In the second part of the letter, Nathan predicts, or rather outlines, the course of events from the present moment until the coming redemption is achieved. Shabbetai Zevi would take the crown. Doesn't Jesus have the crown? From the Turkish king without war and make the Sultan his servant. After 4 or 5 years, he would proceed to the river Shabbetai and to bring back the lost tribes and to marry Rebecca, the 13th daughter of the resuscitated Moses. So they're going to resuscitate Moses, who had died thousands of years ago, and Shabbetai Zevi is going to marry Rebecca, the 13-year-old daughter. During this period, he would put the Turkish Sultan in charge, but the latter would rebel against him in his absence. This would be the period of the birth pangs of redemption, a time for great tribulation, from which only those dwelling in Gaza would be exempt. The whole tenure of this part of the letter is legendary and mythical. Between the present time and the start of the actual messianic events, there would be an interval of 1 year and 7 months, which should be used for doing penance all over the Jewish world. For this purpose, Nathan composed liturgies, one set for the general public and another set for the initiate. So I got this page here called With an Engraving of Shabbetai Zevi Enthroned, Amsterdam, 1666. And if you notice, Shabbetai Zevi is sitting on a throne with a crown over his head, apparently cherub or angels with wings over his head, a bunch of lions up and down the stairs, and see for yourself. Heavy book. So you can see the angels, the crown, the lions on both sides of the stairs, Shabbetai Zevi sitting on the throne. So who would have thunk that there was this Messiah back in 1666? And remember, the Jews back 2017 years ago, that's the calendar date today, rejected the birth of Jesus as the Messiah. But we Christians do not reject that. Anyways, moving back to this book here, the next page, another set for the initiate, some kind of prayers, liturgies, comprising of kavanot and the mystical prayers for the extended feast prescribed by him. These were sent out to Europe and other places along with the first long announcements regarding the advent of the Messiah in the fall of 1665. All right, moving on. Shabbetai Zevi in Smyrna and Constantinople. The first reports about Shabbetai Zevi reached Europe early in October 1665. And in the following 2 months, detailed accounts deeply imbued with legendary material arrived in Italy, Holland, Germany, and Poland. Why all the correspondents from Gaza, Jerusalem, and Egypt, who became so eloquent from September 1665 onward, kept silent during the 3 months after the events in Gaza, is still unexplained. When he left Jerusalem under a cloud, probably before the fast of the 17th of Tammuz, he proceeded through Safed to Aleppo, where he arrived on the 8th of Av, July 20th, 1665, and left on August 12th. Although his fame had preceded him, he refused to appear publicly as the Messiah, but talked to several people in private, including Solomon Lenendio and other members of the rabbinic court who became his enthusiastic supporters. Similarly, when he arrived in Smyrna, a short time before Rosh Hashanah, beginning in September 1665, he kept to himself for a long time, staying with his brother Elijah. In the meantime, a great commotion flared up in Aleppo, where in October and November, the first phenomena of Sabbatan prophesying appeared. The first phenomena. Not only unlettered people, men and women, were swept up in the excitement, but also rabbis and scholars such as Moses Galante from Jerusalem, who had come as an emissary and was caught up in the general turmoil. Also followed the Shabbetai Zevi to Smyrna and Constantinople. Alright, I'm moving around today. Can't find a peaceful spot. Everywhere I go outside, people walk up. But I'm in my office, so let's continue. From Aleppo, there is the first testimony outside Palestine about a general revivalist atmosphere in which there were reports of appearances of the prophet Elijah, and a common fund was set up to maintain the poor and those who were affected by the widespread halt of commercial activities. Well, that's interesting. You know, can you imagine if they do initiate World War III, which apparently is planned to bring about this new age, new world order, the things we're talking about in this book. Some new massiah is supposed to be coming. But can you imagine all the commercial activities that will stop? The martial law that will be implemented? Just stuff to think about. Doesn't seem like a joke what these people are planning, what they've done throughout history. Although Shabbetai Zevi's arrival in Smyrna was preceded by all kinds of letters and rumors which were bound to have precipitated much tension and many expectations, nothing spectacular happened for almost 3 months. The rabbis of Smyrna had received a letter from the Rabbinic of Constantinople about Shabbetai Zevi's excommunication from Jerusalem. Yet no action was taken against him. It was only when his state of ecstasy returned in early December and he became feverishly active in his own way, starting a wild commotion and performing many of his strange acts, that the rabbis made an attempt to stop him. But by then it was too late. The enthusiasm and excitement he engendered swept Smyrna Jewry off its feet. Within a period of 3 weeks, the community was thrown into an uproar, and the intensity and public character of the proceedings assured them that the widest possible echo. There were not only several thousand of Jews, but also a considerable merchant colony of English, Dutch, Italian traders, whose reports to their Eastern friends supplemented the news that now began to stream out of Smyrna from Jewish sources. Although Shabbetai Zevi was in a continuous correspondence with Nathan, that would be the soul healer rabbi, he now acted on his own. The stormy events that follow are fully documented in many sources. Shabbetai Zevi used to recite the morning prayers in one of the synagogues with a very agreeable voice that greatly pleased those who heard him. He gave alms very liberally, rose at midnight to perform ritual immersions in the sea. Ritual immersions in the sea. Dumping people in the sea, like baptizing people. And there was nothing bizarre about his ascetic behavior. But on one of the first days of Hanukkah, He appeared in royal apparel in the synagogue and created a great sensation by his ecstatic sayings. About the same time, a delegation arrived from Aleppo, Moses Galante, Daniel Pinto, and 2 laymen, who had first made a visit to the prophet in Gaza and now wished to greet him officially as the Messiah of Israel. During Hanukkah week, Shabbetai Zevi began to do things that seemed strange, and he pronounced the ineffable name of God, ate forbidden fats, and did other things against the Lord and his law, and even pressing others to do likewise. So he was pressing other people to do things that were against the laws of God. Well, that's significant. Behavioral characteristic of his states of illumination. So he's basically going in a trance in another world, or possessed by demons or angels or something. The infectious presence of believers spurred him on to more radical manifestations. A deep cleft became evident between the majority of believers and the minority of infidels. Became the fixed terms for those who adhered to the faith of Shabbetai Zevi and those who opposed him. Nathan's epistle to Raphael Joseph, since I guess Nathan wrote to Raphael Joseph, was widely distributed and contributed to the growing dissension. To a large extent, the common people joined the camp of the believers without inhibitants or theological misgivings. The glad tidings conquered their hearts, and the fascination of Shabbetai Zevi's personality, with its strange mixture of solemn dignity and unrestrained license, contributed its share. Hundreds of people, largely drawn from the poorer elements of the community, accompanied him wherever he went. But from the beginning, many burghers, wealthy merchants, and brokers joined the movement, as well as rabbinic scholars, including some of the former fellow students. The 3 members of the rabbinic court, who were still opposed to Shabbetai Zevi, deliberated the wisdom of openly proceeding against him. Proclaiming public prayers in reaction, Shabbetai Zevi once more indulged his taste for majestic pomp and behaved with great audacity. Sorry about that, I'm having trouble reading today, but I did feel this was important to get this video done today, to talk about this great Messiah and the things that happened back then, and what do they have to do with what's going on today. Basically, eliminating all the Muslims from the Middle East, overthrowing all the countries, having plans for a greater Israel. You can look up 911, and other crazy things happening in the world right now. We need to put all this into context. Proclaiming public prayers in reaction, so I already said that, with great audacity. On Friday, December 11th, the crowd tried to storm the house, the Hayam Pina, one of the leading infidels, so one of the leading Jews who were opposed to Shabbetai Zevi, the new declared Messiah. The crowd was going to storm the house. And on the following day, matters came to a head. After beginning to recite the morning prayers in one of the synagogues, Shabbetai Zevi broke off and, accompanied by a large crowd, proceeded to the locked doors of the Portuguese congregation, the headquarters of his opponents. So there were some Portuguese Jewish opponents. Taking up an axe, he started to smash the doors, whereupon his opponents opened them and let him in. An astonishing scene followed. Shabbetai Zevi read the portion of the Torah, not from the customary scroll, but from a printed copy. Ignoring the priest and Levites present, he came up to the reading of the law. His brothers and many other men and women, he came up to reading of the law, his brothers and many other women and men, distributing kingdoms to them and demanding that all of them pronounce the ineffable name of the blessings. So here's Shabbetai Zevi in this synagogue, this church, distributing kingdoms among the people there. So giving them lands and making them kings. And making them pronounce the ineffable name of God in their blessings. The names of God you're not supposed to say. Those magic names they use in Kabbalah and stuff like that to bring about things, perform magic. In a furious speech against the unbelieving rabbis, he compared them to unclean animals mentioned in the Bible. He proclaimed that the Messiah, be Joseph, who accorded the Agadic tradition, must precede the advent of the son of David, was a certain Abraham Zalman who had died a martyr's death in 1648 and recited a prayer for the dead in his honor. Then he went up to the ark, so the holy ark, took the holy scroll in his arms, and sang an ancient Castilian love song about Matilda, the emperor's daughter. Into this song, known as his favorite throughout his life, he read many Kabbalistic mysteries. After explaining them to the congregation, he ceremonially proclaimed himself the anointed God of Jacob, the Redeemer of Israel, fixing the date of redemption for the 15th of Sivan, that would be June 18th, 1666. This was in conformity with the date announced by Nathan in one of his more optimistic moods, when he considered the possibility of an earlier advent than originally predicted. Shabbetai Zevi announced that in a short time he would seize the crown of the Great Turk, when Hiram Benavisti, one of the dissenting rabbis present, asked him for proof of his mission. He flew into a rage and excommunicated him, and at the same time calling on some of those present to testify to their faith by uttering the ineffable name again. The dramatic scene amounted to a public messianic announcement and the substitution of a messianic Judaism for the traditional and imperfect one. There is reliable testimony that besides other innovations in the law, he promised the woman that he would set them free from the curse of Eve. So it would be Adam and Eve in the Bible. Immediately after this Sabbath, he dispatched one of his rabbinic followers to Constantinople to make preparation for his arrival. I'm only reading my highlighted portions here. I'm just trying to point out something huge went on back in 1666. Declaring a Messiah for the whole Judaism peoples is no small thing. At any rate, on the 5th of Teret, December 23rd, Shabbetai Zevi engineered the expulsion of La Papa from his office and the appointment of Benavisti as the sole chief rabbi of Smyrna. In the next few days, all the believers were asked to come and kiss the hand of the Messianic king. Most of the community did so, including some infidels, who were afraid of the mounting terrorism of the believers. Immediately after this regal ceremony, Shabbetai Zevi decreed the abolition of the fast of the 10th of Tevet. When this act aroused the opposition of some of the rabbis, the angry crowd wanted to attack them. Solomon Agassiz, a great scholar and a famous Kabbalist who persisted in his opposition, was forced to flee to Magnesia, and his house was plundered. Again, this was no small thing. La Papa hid in the house of one of his colleagues. On the following Sabbath, the name of the Turkish Sultan was struck out from the prayer of the ruler, and a former prayer for Shabbetai Zevi as the Masonic king of Israel was instituted. A custom later followed by many communities throughout the diaspora. The people dispersed all over the world, the Jews. Now remember, in the last 100 years, there's been something called Aliyah. The Jews from all over the world are being forced, coerced, encouraged to move to Israel. And they have been. In countries where they didn't want to leave, chaos and anarchy was incited by the Zionist high-level Jewish people to make it uncomfortable for them to live in the lands they lived. I've done a lot of research. That's the way it was. So they would cause anti-Semitism so as to motivate the Jews to leave. Think about that. All right, moving on. Instead of his actual name, the practice at this time of calling him by the appellation Amara, our Lord and King, may his majesty be exalted, and an allusion to the term emir. The new term was widely used in Sabbatean literature up to the beginning of the 19th century. So during the 1800s. Again, this is no small thing. This plan for this new age with this Messiah, somebody coming, these people ruling the world from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, is real. President Donald Trump in the news recently, and the issue of moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to 40 miles away into Jerusalem is real. It's in the news, mainstream. All the things that have been going on, 9/11, World War I, World War II. And apparently the Freemasonic lodges and many other secret societies are fronts for these Kabbalistic peoples. Not all Jewish people, but the people involved in the New Age and the New World Order. Regrettably, a lot of people are duped. They think that this thing called liberalism, being liberal, or progressive is a good thing. It's all meant to deny the Word of God, so I understand, and I'm not trying to preach. You can see what's said here, and as I read further on, you'll see that the parallel set of commandments that Shabbetai Zevi comes up with are parallel and opposite of the Ten Commandments. So who are they worshiping? Who is their deity? What do they believe? And now we have, of course, all the people who are crying and painfully hurt that Hillary Clinton lost the presidential election, while the other 50% are trying to believe in President Donald Trump. So it could have gone either way, but one half of the country would have been upset. And I believe that's all intentional, and it's called the dialectric process, and they call it the Hegelian dialectic. Divide and conquer. Get the two peoples to fight each other, the Republicans against the Democrats, or the Democrats against the Republicans, the gays against the straights, the blacks against the whites, the Americans against the Muslims, and so forth, and on, the rich against the poor, the young against the old, whoever they can blame for our woes and the disturbing things that happen economically in our society, terror events and all that. the people behind the scenes, these Kabbalistic people wanting to take over the world, are the actual puppet masters, the way I see it. Doesn't mean everybody has to see it that way. But I'm not afraid to say what I think. And if you read these words, as we'll see here further on, you can make up your own mind. So these people who opposed this Shabbetai Zevi being the Messiah, their houses were plundered, they had to flee. On the following Sabbath, the name of the Turkish Sultan was struck from the prayer, and I already read all that. And now Shabbetai Zevi is being called the Lord and King. May His Majesty be exalted. And a festive atmosphere of joy and enthusiasm marked the succeeding days. Many people from other Turkish communities arrived and joined the movement. Among them, Abraham Yakahani, a famous preacher. Among them, Abraham Yakahani, a famous preacher and Kabbalist in Constantinople, who had known Shabbetai Zevi since 1658, and now became one of the most active propagandists. So when you do create these kinds of movements, people come out of the woodwork. And it happens now in 2017. Where is this charismatic character that's supposed to show up as part of prophecy to save the world from some looming great doom event, nuclear explosion or whatever, and be declared probably some new Messiah? What will the people do in 2017? We already see what they're doing over the last election, as bizarre as all that was. All right. In a fit of mass hysteria, people from all classes of society started to prophesize about Shabbetai Zevi. Men, women, and children fell into a trance, declaiming acknowledgments of Shabbetai Zevi as Messiah and biblical passages of a Masonic nature. When their senses returned, they remembered nothing. It seems like they were massively wide. They were possessed. Large groups of these people were group possessed. They didn't remember anything later. About 150 prophets arose in Smyrna, among them Shabbetai Zevi's wife, and the daughters of some of the infidels. Some had visions of Shabbetai Zevi's crown, and some saw him sitting on the throne. But most of them produced a mere jumble of phrases and quotations from the Bible and the prayer book, repeating over and over again. Trade and commerce came to a standstill. Dancing and festive processions alternated with the penitential exercises prescribed by Nathan, Psalms 21, which had been given to Shabbatin's interpretation in Gaza, was recited at each of the 3 daily services, a custom which spread to many other communities. So again, I keep saying this was no small thing. That's why I'm reading this now. In the process of making my videos, I pondered and said, where shall I go next? Moving on here. As well as distributing the kingdoms of the earth among the faithful. So he's making all these people kings, giving them kingdoms. Shabbetai Zevi appointed counterparts of the ancient Israeli kings from David to Zerubbabel, and several of these obtained handwritten patents from the Messiah. The appointees were his main supporters in Smyrna, but included some of his devotees from Palestine, Egypt, Aleppo, Constantinople, and Brasa. Many other Masonic dignitaries were appointed. After this, his last activity in Smyrna, Shabbetai Zevi sailed to Constantinople December 30th, 1665, accompanied by some of his kings. So he made some of his followers kings. His behavior during this period was as consistent as his unstable mind would allow. He was sure he was of his calling and believed that some supernatural intervention would bring his messianic mission to fruition. In the meantime, the Turkish authorities in the capital had been aroused by alarming reports. The news from Gaza and Smyrna had already divided the community, and the waves of excitement rose high. Letters from places through which Shabbetai Zevi had passed combined factual reports with increasingly fanciful stories and raised the messianic fever to an even higher pitch. Even before his arrival, a prophet arose in Constantinople, Moses Survile, a young rabbi from Bersha, who, unlike the other prophets, revealed Sabbatian mysteries in a language of the Zohar, another Jewish book, and was credited with a particular charisma. And this whole fever of this Messiah and all these prophets springing up were everywhere back then. The Messiah's arrival was considerably delayed by the extremely stormy weather, and in the meantime the atmosphere of the capital became critical. Some of the heads of the community seemed to have warned the government, which had already taken steps to arrest Shabbetai Zevi in Smyrna, where the order arrived too late, and on his arrival in Constantinople. The non-Jews population were caught up in the excitement, and satire songs about the Messiah were sung in the streets. So satire songs were sung in the streets, while the Jewish masses, certain of many miracles would take place immediately after his arrival, showed a marked pride before the Gentiles. Wow. Revolts were frequent in Turkey, and the rebels were generally speedily put to death. Revolts were frequent in Turkey, and the rebels generally speedily put to death. That was not the immediate consequence. This was not the immediate consequence of Shabbetai Zevi's arrest. After interception by boat in the Sea of Marana on February 6, 1666, did much to strengthen the belief of the faithful. So a lot of his followers who would declare themselves prophets or generally revolt were immediately put to death. But apparently they didn't do that to Shabbetai Zevi, which strengthened the belief of the faithful. Amid great commotion, he was brought ashore in chains on Monday, February 8th. By this time, the disruption of normal life and commerce had reached its peak. 1 or 2 days after his arrest, Shabbetai Zevi was brought before the divan, presided over by the Kuprula. Since the Turkish archives of this period were destroyed by fire, no official Turkish documents about the movement and proceedings in this case have survived, and reports from Jewish and Christian sources in Constantinople are conflicting. Alright, moving on, trying to finish this video. It is true, however, that the vizier showed surprising leniency and patience, to which Shabbetai Zevi's undoubted charm and the fascination of his personality may have contributed. He may have wanted to avoid making a martyr of the Messiah, who, after all, had not taken up arms against the Sultan, had simply proclaimed an unrealistic, mystical takeover of the crown. Shabbetai Zevi was put in prison, and at first in a dark dungeon, but later in fairly comfortable quarters, and the high official responsible for the police and the prison, possibly after the accepting substantial bribes, permitted him to receive visitors from his followers. So it didn't seem like he was put in a very harsh prison. It was said that he could have obtained his release by a very large bribe, which his followers were prepared to pay, but that he refused, thereby greatly enhancing his reputation. He was also self-confident. During this period, he had returned to a normal state, led by ascetic life, preached repentance, and claimed no special privilege. The rabbis of the capital who visited him in prison found a dignified scholar who bore his sufferings with an air of nobility, rather than a sinner who set himself above the law and tradition. The rabbis were divided amongst themselves. Some of the outstanding ones, among them were Abraham Anawa, taking his side. When the Sultan and the Vizier left for the war in Crete, the order was given to transfer Shabbetai Zevi to a fortress in Gallipoli, where important political prisoners were detained on the European side of the Dardanelles. I guess those are the mountains. The transfer was made on April 19th, the day before Passover. Once more in the grip of a state of illumination, Shabbetai Zevi sacrificed a Passover lamb and roasted it in its fat, inducing his companions to eat the forbidden food, blessing it with the now customary blessings, he who permits the forbidden. Here we go again, where he's permitting the forbidden. By means of bribes, the believers soon converted his detention into an honorable confinement. The movement in the diaspora, another paragraph. The letters arriving in all parts of diaspora from Palestine, Egypt, and Aleppo in October and November 1965, and a letter from Smyrna and Constantinople produced a tremendous excitement. And similarly, of the reactions everywhere indicates that the causes of the response went far beyond local factors. Messianic fever took hold of communities that had no immediate experience of persecution and bloodshed, as well as those that had. So even people who were never persecuted or saw bloodshed were getting gripped by this Messianic fever. Social and religious factors were no doubt inextricably combined in the outbreak. Poverty and persecution bred utopian hopes. Poverty and persecution bred utopian hopes. But the situation of the Jewish people as a whole provided the relevant background. Although the Lurianic doctrine of Tukum, that's a version of the Kabbalah, and redemption expressed a social situation too, its real content was essentially religious. It is this interlocking of the various elements of the historical makeup of the Sabbatean movement which accounts for its dynamics and explosive content. Later, the movement was presented in a different light in a strenuous attempt to minimize the part played by the upper strata of Jewish society and the spiritual leaders, and to ascribe developments of the outbreak to the blind enthusiasm of the rabble and the poor. But this is not borne out by the contemporary evidence. Many of the rich took a leading part in the spreading of the Messianic propaganda, although there was no lack of those who, as the saying went at the time, were more interested in great profits than in great prophets. So there was no lack of those who, as the saying went at the time, no lack of these, of people who were interested in great profits, making a lot of money, than in great prophets, people who speak from some words from the divine, prophesizing. 5 factors contributed to the overwhelming success of the Masonic awakening. The Messianic call came from the Holy Land, from the center that stood for pure spirituality in its most intense. A message from there would be received in Persia, Kyrgyzstan, Yemen with the respect in which it scarcely command had it arrived from Poland or Italy. The tremendous prestige of the new Kabbalah, which emanated from Safed, also played a part. So think about that. Why did they have 911? Where will this Messiah come from? What will they plan? What will happen? What kind of fever will possess all the people all over the world? Even the Christian Zionists who say anybody who doesn't support Zionism, that God will destroy them. So all this stuff is real. I have more here to read. I think I'll save it for another day. I just wanted to make a point that this stuff is real. This Messiah was declared, and he apparently preaches some kind of religion that is opposite the Ten Commandments, which one would probably think would be, according to all the secret societies, who admit, even like Helena Blavatsky, that Lucifer was their deity, including Albert Pike. Lucifer is their deity. The Satanists, Lucifer is their deity. These are all apparently derivatives of the Kabbalistic teachings. So who brings about all these secret societies all over the world? As one commenter said to my videos, you know, Freemasonry is just a front for the Judaism. And of course it's not all the Judaism. It's a lot of people in the Jewish religion in the United States and the world are oblivious to this, don't want to talk about this. So I understand. But there are a lot of people in higher places on the pyramid, in groups like in the Illuminati, which are real and mentioned in these documents, and other secret societies and Kabbals and Rosicrucian and Kabbalistic circles and Freemasonic circles and other secret societies that are planning on bringing about this new age and new world order. And it doesn't seem to be boding well for the rest of us, whatever they have planned. So we might want to wake up and not buy into the propaganda of them saying that Jesus was a myth, he was not the Messiah, that Christianity people are haters. But people are buying this stuff. They get caught up in this fever of whatever's going on. I watch the press releases. They hate Donald Trump. They want the gay agenda. They want all this other stuff that seems to be in line with Shabbetai Zevi's teaching. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.